If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
Leon ducking the smoke. What's up, everybody? This is EJ Stewart, Tommy Beer coming at you now. This is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast and Audacy WFAN original podcast you can get, of course, wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Tommy, we got a lot to talk about on today's show. We will be talking about Leon Rose. Still has not talked to the media since the offseason started. In fact, he has not talked to the media in almost 2 years now, and there was a request from The Athletic to do an interview. He rejected that as well. So, you know, we've kind of avoided this subject because I think we wanted to really make this a basketball podcast, but given it's the offseason and given it came up again, I think this is actually probably the best time to kind of break down where we stand on the Knicks media or lack thereof policy moving forward, with Leon Rose once again rejecting to talk to the media despite the offseason moves they've made. Also, speaking of offseason moves, what's going on with Tom Thibodeau? It's the one question I wish we could have asked Ian Bagley on the show, but good news for us Knicks fans, he actually answered it on his own platform, SNY, in terms of what's the deal with a Tibbs potential extension. We'll talk about that. And staying in the Atlantic Division, you got a rival making a major move. Jaylen Brown, now the highest paid player in NBA history. What does that mean for the Celtics? How do the Knicks match up with the Celtics moving forward, knowing that Brown's going to be part of the fold? So we got plenty to get to on this episode of Orange and Blue Bloods. So make sure you keep it locked right here after this. So like I said, Tommy Beer joins me as always. And Tommy, I'm doing a little bit of an audible, but my girlfriend would be upset if I didn't pull this audible because I showed her the pictures yesterday. She said, you have to talk about this on the podcast. I saw the Beer family has a new addition. So I want to say congrats. You got a new dog in the family, and you know my girlfriend's a dog lover as well. We got our dog Lita in November, so she wanted to make sure that I made note of that and give you the proper congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I would have brought up our little Maisel.
Yeah.
Call her. My daughter wanted to call her Hazel. My wife wanted to call her Maisie. So Maisel was the compromise. And yes, beautiful silver lab. Yeah, we're doing the house training thing right now. So wish us luck. In addition to congratulations, we're trying to clean up after a little bit here and there. But yes, it's made for an eventful week, that's for sure. But for as a fellow dog lover, it's all the down stuff and all the negative stuff you have to put up with is worth the years and years of love. So yeah, good week.
Absolutely. And now I have an alibi. If someone questions that there was a dog in the background and people usually running to blame me for that, now I can say, hey, it wasn't me this time. Maybe it was Tommy. You don't actually know. So thank you for that alibi moving forward on this podcast. I won't be taking the brunt of the audio issues that may come because of a dog getting a little too loud or a little too involved in the show than we would like. But anyway, again, this is Orange and Blue Bloods, a New York Knicks podcast and Audacy WFAN original. Once again, it's a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you get the auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. We drop twice a week during the off season. So this will be our last episode for this week. We'll have more episodes next week. Of course, you can check us out on YouTube as well. You can find our full episodes and clips of our shows on the WFAN channel. And I mentioned earlier we had, of course, the interview with Tommy Beer, which has gotten a little bit of attention. So shout out to the Knicks fans that have showed love for that interview. If you want to watch that interview, I know a lot of you have heard it. But if you want to watch the video, that again is on the WFAN channel as of Wednesday night. We are recording this podcast Thursday afternoon, so it's up there if you want to watch after you already listen. Make sure you listen first. That helps us out. Make sure you listen first, but after you listen, make sure you watch it as well. Again, you can find that on the WFAN YouTube channel. But let's begin with Leon Rose. So we mentioned during our last episode that the Knicks had a pretty busy week. I mean, they waived Dwayne Washington. They waived former second-round pick Trevor Keels. They did these moves to make way for the Cleveland Cavaliers' former first-round pick from 2019, Dylan Windler, who now joins the Knicks on a two-way deal for 1 year on the contract. We also had notable moves, obviously, in the offseason. We had the signing of Dante DiVincenzo. We had the departure of Obi Toppin. But regardless of all that, don't expect to hear from Leon Rose anytime soon. Fred Katz of The Athletic tweeted Wednesday that the Knicks had officially declined a request to speak on the record for an interview. Katz noted that Leon has not spoken on the record to independent media in almost 2 years, has not done a solo news conference since joining the Knicks in 2020. So I think this is the perfect opportunity to kind of really have a great conversation. And Tommy's a great person to have it with, being a member of the media who's credentialed, goes to Knicks games, talks to these people, talks to a lot of these other beat writers who are on the beat. So I'm very curious what that side of it is, because I think there is a disconnect, because you have fans who, a lot of them say, we don't care, it's not a big deal. But then you have these media members trying to do their job who say, hey, one, we provide value, we provide information that helps the fans understand what's going on. And that is really basically a dereliction of duty from the Knicks front office to not speak to the media, and especially the president of all people to duck the media for, going on 2 years, almost 3 years since you had a actual news conference. In your eyes, do you think it's a big deal that Leon Rose did not speak to the media?
A big deal is probably I don't know if I'd go that quite that far. I will start by saying I understand both ends of the spectrum. I understand one, as you mentioned, the credential media member, especially in years past when it's evolved a little bit. I mean, the journalism game, we could spend 3 episodes on that in and of itself. Right. It's so different from the time of print media and pre-Twitter and all that stuff, when, the way fans consumed basketball was far different. Now there's so many different ways educated fans, should they choose to find intelligent discourse about the team they follow, about the sport they follow, via podcasts, via websites dedicated specifically to their team or to the league, or to sports, or to the intersection of sports and economics. Everything that's out there, the beauty of the internet, provides all that stuff. That being said, so it's not as important as it once was for beat writers to get quotes on the record from the person in charge. That being said, there's no reason for the Knicks media to continue such an antagonistic, petty policy to prevent media from essentially doing their jobs. It's one of those things that kind of built up over years and years when the Knicks were awful, and Knicks beat writers correctly assessed their situation as dire, because and the Knicks and characterized the Knicks as awful because they were awful. And that really, they built up some animosity. So you combine that, the Knicks losing for decades and kind of being a laughing stock, with a decision maker at the very top who, as we know, has very thin skin. Love him or hate him, as an owner, not afraid to spend. A lot of pros, from Rangers and Knicks fans when you talk about, his stewardship of these two franchises. Also a lot of negatives, certainly trending in the right direction as he kind of takes more hands-off approach, kind of sticks to his word. But clearly that's a top-down policy that prevents the media from interacting with front office and players as much as you like. And really the people who are hurt, even though they don't see it as such, some fans do, some fans don't, but it is the fan base, because the more knowledge and more, access you have, the more likely, you are to find out the true person behind the player. In years past, we would have had in-depth interviews about IQ and him growing up, and faith is obviously a big part of his life. He signs off every interview with, glory to God first. And Quinn Grimes, talking about going from Kentucky to Houston. And then there's just a lot there that we just don't have access to. And I think it would enhance the fan experience. Again, without it, you can still be a great fan. You can still enjoy it in much the same ways you could in years past. But I do think that it hinders the connection between fans and players, coaches, front office stuff, and I don't see that as a positive. That being said, I don't see it as a massive negative that's going to bring down the franchise, as some would like to argue. So I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's so tricky, especially sitting in this chair, because I come from a perspective that is almost purely fan. I mean, I work as a radio host, or radio producer, now obviously podcast host, but before that, essentially fan. So I think the fan perspective, because I think what I've seen is this disconnect from media members saying, why do the fans almost sometimes cheerlead this policy that the Knicks have? And I think it still stems from an issue that was the Knicks' fault, but I think it stems from what I feel like was a lack of substance from some, I cannot say all, from some people that covered the Knicks regularly that seemed almost hell-bent on only highlighting the circus and not the play. And one thing I've said about, I think not just Knicks media, but sports media in general, I think is lost, and why there is such a disconnect between fans and sports media members and people who cover the NBA particularly, is I think sometimes we've lost sight of the fact that fans want to learn things. Yeah. Like, I think sometimes we think that because everybody has a Twitter account, everybody has a YouTube channel, everybody has a blog or a podcast, that all we want is opinion. And all we want is controversy. Like, there are also a lot of people who want to learn about the game, learn about their team, what makes their team strong, what makes their team weak. And I think because the Knicks were so dysfunctional for so long, I think the media got comfortable, and the people that covered this team got comfortable covering it from only that perspective. And when the narrative and the obvious work the Knicks were doing was changing from that perspective, I didn't think there was any adjustment. I think it's been slow to adjustment. I think that the media and the Knicks crew that's currently covering the team right now does a really good job. I think they've actually improved massively over the last 3, 4, 5 years. But I think sometimes you've seen that lag nationally when you see how the Knicks get covered, the people that talk about them, how they talk about them. Like, they still don't get it. So that's where the cheerleading comes from. And it stems from a Knicks problem because the Knicks had 20 years of dysfunction that allowed that to kind of be the status quo. But, it comes to a situation where it's like, you got to, you're an old dog, you got to learn new tricks at some point. And I think the fans clamor for that. I think we're at a different point now. And as thin-skinned as Dolan is, I think he has to understand that what you see on the national media isn't necessarily what's happening with these individual beat writers who are covering the team, who do a great job. You can list them all. Obviously, Bagley was on there. I just mentioned Katz. Run them all. They all do a fine job. Like, there's no reason why you can't have your president sit down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes and talk about the team. Like, it just seems like it's so it's so extreme. And I think in many ways it almost invites this contentious attitude that the media then has towards the team that doesn't actually end up equating into anything. And to me, the Knicks may feel like they're winning in the end because they're winning games and for the most part fans are content. But I almost feel like it paints you in the corner where, like, you almost can't win this battle until you win a championship, which we know is very difficult in the NBA. The Knicks aren't necessarily in this position where, they're one of the 2 or 3 teams that are locked to win a championship. So to continue this game, it just feels like, all right, next year you have a down year. We just saw what happened in 2022 when we thought Knicks were going to have a great year. Like, you have another down year, and then now we're calling for Tibbs' head again. We're calling for Leon Rose's head again. I mean, do you really think you can go all this time without having anybody talk? It doesn't seem to make much sense.
I think that's a really good point, is there's no real downside to trotting Leon Rose out into the, in front of a few beat reporters and listen, he's an incredibly intelligent person and also just businessman, and he understands the business of the NBA, and that is to say a lot without saying anything. Right. The beat reporters understand that there's very little likelihood he's going to say, I don't think IQ's that good, so we'll offer him a decent contract if he takes it. Like this, it's not going to happen. He's not going to bash Obi Toppin and say, if Obi Toppin ever defended, then he'd play a lot. So don't ask, that's it's we loved Obi. It's just a numbers game. It's just all these cliches. You throw them out there, and there's just very little downside. There's very little reason to argue to make the to come up with some rationale that have it make sense. In other words, and my guess is Leon Rose would probably prefer to do just that. To go out there. I think so. I mean,
I lean the opposite way, but yeah, I want to know why you think so.
I would just think because it's just it takes away from the story. Maybe he wants to make it about himself to avoid the team, but it just takes away a story that people can write nationally. Whereas you mentioned, I think that Dolan enjoys the cat and mouse game. He enjoys the animosity. I just think it's one of those things. Listen, you guys bashed me for 20 years and now we're good. So now you want to talk to us? Well, ha 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 ha. You can't get what you want. That type of thing. Where again, it's the fan. And another good point you made was, yes, we can all come up with conjecture on why we think Obi Toppin didn't work out, or what they might do with Emmanuel Quickly, how they might handle the backup power forward position, all these other things, etc. But I think we fans would benefit with an explanation. Now, they're not going to tell us we're looking at player X, Y, and Z to bring in. They can't talk about other players and free agents under contract, but they could, maybe give us some insight as to, Julius Randle actually was hurt more than you guys might imagine. He forced his way out there, just things that we aren't privy to. And credit to Leon Rose for kind of keeping, the inner workings of the team pretty much a secret. You don't hear a lot of stuff leaked about the Knicks. There was, conflicting conjecture about what they were offering in the Donovan Mitchell trade, etc. But there are other organizations where as soon as it leaks out immediately, and it's happened with the Knicks in the past. They've done a good job of kind of sealing that up. But again, the bigger picture is why not? Who does it hurt to have Leon Rose, or if you don't want to have Rose out there, have the Rosas, or Scott Perry when he was around. Just one of those guys out there to go out, give a few cliches, and then the story goes away, and we don't have to waste our time discussing it.
It's funny you talk about things leaking out. I think one of the worst examples of that in Knicks history was Mike D'Antoni in the Knicks front office basically telling everybody that would listen that they wanted to take Steph Curry. And of course, he went one pick before them. That did not work out well for them. So
too soon, EJ.
I know, right? And so what, 14 years later, 13 years later, whatever it's been, it still feels too soon. I mean, are the Knicks going to be able to keep getting away with this? Like, that's the thing that I keep thinking about as well, because I can't imagine Adam Silver likes this, though. I think we've seen now Adam Silver is not cut from the David Stern cloth, so I don't know if he comes down with a hammer. Like, does this ever get fixed? Like, what's the deal with, like, you think it's just not? No, right?
Until Dolan's gone, until Dolan decides to sell a team, and which he, it's a literally a printing press. It just makes money, which is the reason he is unlikely to sell it. What's the worst Silver's going to do? Find, Dolan. He'll find, $500,000 in his couch cushions, and cut a check to Silver that next day. The one thing we know is, is Dolan's not going to, back down from a challenge, or again, he'll just take that.
He invites fights.
100%. And to be honest, I think one of the reasons why Silver doesn't push it, and maybe the people around Dolan don't encourage him, because every time he tends to speak, it backfires. There's countless times when, over the years, we went on Michael Kay's show a couple times, said things.
He was on Craig Garden and Evan Roberts' show on WFAN last year, and that didn't go as great as we would have hoped.
Right. It just very rarely goes well. Let's just say that. There was the thing with the, video monitoring of lawyers. He went on, I don't know, it was ABC, Good Morning America, something like that. He decided to hop on one morning and just said a bunch of stuff.
He said he's going to ban alcohol on on Good Morning New York or whatever on Fox 5. It was crazy.
Right. Which, like, he's not going to accept alcohol sales. So yeah, I think that may be part of the reason where, obviously, unlike Rose and Tibbs, when they know how to talk without saying anything. Dolan has never mastered that part of the business, that craft.
My theory as to why I think Leon actually enjoys this is because I go back to his background as an agent. Like, most agents that aren't, I guess, Drew Rosenhaus in football. I'm trying to think of other. I guess maybe Rich Paul. Those are the only two I could think of that, like, want to be in front of the camera, want to talk to the press. It seems like that would be a negative. But to be fair, those guys are very successful, so it just worked well for them. But most agents like to work from the shadows. And I tend to think I don't know if it's conspiracy, I don't go that far, but my theory is that when he signed on to be president of the Knicks, that Leon Rose said that this is not a part of the job that I want to do. I do not want to be someone who is a front-facing member of the Knicks that has to explain everything we do and deal with the press every couple weeks or every month. Like, that was something I don't want to do. I'll do this job, but that I don't want to do that. And I think maybe he demanded, or rather he said, look, I can bring you stars. So, like, are you really going to be upset that I don't talk to, Fred Katz every couple of weeks? Like, come on, I can get you Donovan Mitchell. I can get you Devin Booker. Like, let's do this. And Dolan was like, great. You don't want to talk with the media? You hate them too? Awesome. that makes you even a better candidate. Where do you sign? So that's my theory as to why this has gone so long, particularly with the Knicks front office, because Tibbs talks all the time.
Right.
In terms of the regular media availability. But I think Leon, I don't think he wants to talk to the media.
Yeah, the coaching thing is part of the CB. Listen, if it wasn't part of the collective bargaining agreement, and they, that's something where you have to get, you get fined, and then would, then you're talking about $1 million a week, and that even for a billionaire, that stuff adds up, and that would be an issue. So, I think that, but yeah, if it was part of the collective bargaining agreement, or stipulated in some bylaws that they had to have, professional representation once a month or once a week, or, it probably would be, unlikely for that to be the case. But that might put some fire underneath Dolan. But again, even if Rose didn't want to do it, I'm sure Scott Perry would have been happy. Maybe that upped his, profile around the league and increased the chance of him becoming a general manager, being in front of the New York media and all the others. So I think there was, and there was plenty of times when we'd be in the locker room before games, and this was when, pre-COVID kind of changed everything. It was just a lot freer environment, and certain franchises really took advantage of the constricted media policy, and obviously the Knicks being friends. I'll give you an example. When the WNBA announced prior to this season that they were limiting the time that they would have players available. It used to be you can go in locker room, 15 minutes available. Right. Now the team decided that they were going to choose the players, and basically I tweeted that this is a slippery slope. I've seen it before. Yada yada yada. A league office member, let's just say that, behind the scenes, pretty high up in the WNBA league offices contacted me, reached out to me directly and said, listen, do you have a couple minutes? I just want to tell you where we're coming from our perspective. And he very, earnestly, and I think forthrightly explained that it wasn't to reduce access. It was so that because the way it worked was they would put, let's say Stewie and Ionescu out, 10 minutes after the game ended. But if you wanted MJ or Jonquel Jones, you'd have to run to the locker room, and maybe they left before you got back. And if you wanted to talk to the coach and Brondella, whatever the case might be. So his explanation was, we're going to make sure that everyone has the same access to the same 2-3 star players, Breanna Stewart, yada, yada, yada. And then if you want to talk to anybody else, just let us know, when we promise we'll bring them down. I said, that's all well and good. And I think it's a well-intentioned potential improvement, but I'm just going to let you know. He goes, well, what team do you cover primarily? I said the Knicks, and he goes, oh, okay. I get it. So, just because it's just well known throughout the league, and I think it was Bondi, or I forget, somebody tweeted about the DiVincenzo. They're not going to have an introductory press conference for DiVincenzo. And he said, welcome to New York, literally the polar opposite of Golden State. And anyone who's ever dealt with the Warriors are just beyond, welcoming and encouraging you to get one-on-ones with players and et cetera, and all that other stuff. So again, the issue is you don't allow Leon Rose to talk. You slowly chip away at those freedoms. And it's kind of the old thing. How do you boil a frog in water? You don't just drop it into boiling water because it'll jump right out. You put it in, turn the degrees up a little bit. And they've started to chip away at all these other things. And again, the Leon Rose not giving us cliches for 5 minutes is not a big deal. But circling back to my original point, that the Knicks media policy decreases the likelihood of a well-intentioned writer. In other words, a writer not looking to bag on the Knicks, not coming in with a bias and a predetermined outcome that this guy's the worst, that, all I want to do is get Tibbs on the record, or get a player on the record saying that Tibbs isn't a good coach. And then I'll, again, a well-intentioned, well-meaning writer getting a one-on-one with, perfect example, like QJ Peterson. Let's say he's in camp. Right. Yeah. We would have got that type of story. And that's the type of stuff. Again, it doesn't, make or break fandom. It's not, but it just, I think, in my opinion, gives you a little more access, gives you a little bit more behind the curtain. Sometimes that's not always good. But in general, my experience is NBA players are really, for the most part, kind, empathetic. They relatively humble. Listen, there are outliers. There are guys that are on the other end of the spectrum, just like there are in all aspects of life. But I think a lot of these guys came from difficult situations. To get to the NBA, you need luck. You need to overcome a million different things, no matter how physically talented you are for the most part. They understand that. And they're welcoming with their time, and they'd like to, talk about other issues, now. And the other thing, we might as well be mentioned is that there's a distrust of the mainstream media.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
That's kind of been co-opted by a political party. So that leads to I think there's an aspect of that kind of, celebrates when that mainstream media, even though that's very difficult to define nowadays, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When those folks somehow get taken down a peg and don't have access, that's a win for the common guy. So, again, as you mentioned, we could have quite a conversation on this.
We can go on this forever, and if I could do another podcast, it would be a media discussion podcast. Like, I love this kind of stuff. I mean, my last thing on it would just be for the Knicks beat writers who all work hard and they all do a great job. And I think they've improved, in my opinion, over the last 4 or 5 years or so. I think when we ask why do the fans, how can we get through to the fans that we should have more access? I mean, you gotta make people want you to talk to these people. I mean, sometimes we watch these press conferences with Tom Thibodeau. I've come on here in this in this podcast and said Tom Thibodeau pulled Obi Toppin in the fourth quarter, and nobody asked him what the hell's going on. Randall, throws the ball away and doesn't run back on defense. Nobody asked him what the hell was that. Did you show him that? And nobody's asking Tibbs these questions. And I think what happens is we watch some of these press conferences and we're like, I mean, if that's what we're gonna get from these press conferences, am I gonna go crazy that these guys aren't talking to Leon Rose or Worldwide West of them? So my thing, and I'm not saying it's perfect because Nick shouldn't be doing this. Like, I don't think that this is right. But my thing is, hey, make it worthwhile for the fans to actually want you to get access in order for this to maybe turn the tide, maybe the fans on your side.
I'll just say this in defense of the beat writers, having been in those press conferences, been in the auxiliary press room outside MSG, the media room, the Knicks, unlike a lot of other teams, will put a time limit on it. Whether it's 7 minutes, 8 minutes, they don't tell you how long that's going to be. They don't tell you how many questions they're going to take. If Tibbs is in a bad mood, they'll yank him early. I remember when I was covering Isaiah Thomas's tenure there, and they tried to get him out of there quickly. D'Antoni was a little more free flowing. Larry Brown kind of did his own thing, and they let him kind of ramble on. Jonathan Soprano, which was kind of running the team back then, the media side. So the beat writers, there are certain, core elements that they need to get asked, and they'll assume they'll have time to ask it. Sometimes they get yanked before. And just one other thing kind of circling back that I think led to the tension was, for 5 years, 6 years, 2 decades, it wasn't important to ask questions about why did Alexei Shved not, why are there less dribble handoffs in the top of the league? Or, there's just the games didn't matter for months and months at a time. So there wasn't that it kind of eroded that relationship where you just ask, well, what are you going to do in the offseason? When is this guy going to get fired? Is this guy going to be free agent? Those type of questions, because nobody cared about a team that was 30 games under 500 with, in late April.
Yeah, it's like a chicken or egg discussion that won't get fixed. I agree, unless James Dolan has a sudden change of heart or he's somehow no longer the owner, which I wouldn't bet on that at that point. It's a point in time. So anyway, moving forward here, again, special thanks to one of those Knicks beat writers, SNY insider Ian Bagley, who jumped on the show earlier this weekend. You can listen to that podcast. You can also check us out on YouTube to watch that episode. And one thing that I did not get to ask him that I told Tommy after the show that really bugged me was I was very interested in the status of the head coach and Tom Thibodeau. He has 2 years left on his deal, which would mean, in theory, this would be a season where the Knicks would be looking to extend him. Now, here's what Bagley said in his mailbag for SNY, which, of course, you can go check out on SNY.tv. On the subject, he said, quote, I don't know where Thibodeau is on that, talking about his job security, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks at least looked into the topic and talked to Thibodeau's representation this year, assuming it goes well, about a potential extension, because you don't want your coach going into the final year of his deal. You don't want uncertainty surrounding him, assuming you are supporting that coach. I thought this word choice was very interesting. It was very much, I don't know what they're doing with that. The thought would be, if you like him, you will have those conversations, but it wasn't a surefire thing that those conversations are actually happening. So I guess my question to start, Tommy, is, are you surprised that the Knicks maybe aren't being that proactive with Tibbs extension?
Yeah, I'm not shocked. I will say that. I'm sure they've had some upper office conversations about it. Maybe they do before the start of the season. However, I think there's probably a better chance that they do not. Again, he has 2 years left on his deal, so it's not one. I think assuming the Knicks play well, make the playoffs, maybe a top 6 seed, at least, make not just the play-in, but make the playoffs that, assuming all other things equal, there's no kind of blow up between Tibbs and a player, some along those lines.
Right.
That Tibbs will get rewarded with an extension following this season. But again, something we've talked about, and I think it's really important to hammer home. And we just talked about Leon Rose for 20 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah.
The Leon Rose is savvy. He's been around this business of basketball, not just the NBA, the business of basketball for a very long time. And he understands the high stakes. They have a good relationship, but it's, again, business, show business, not friend business.
There you go.
He understands that if things go sideways this season, Randall gets hurt, they don't have a backup power forward. Why didn't you sign a backup power forward, Leon Rose? Tibbs, why did you play him 39 minutes a night for, since the moment you arrived? This guy's going to take the blame. IQ was unhappy about his contract situation. He's pressing because he didn't sign an extension.
Right.
RJ Barrett shoots 31% from 3-point territory. There is a scenario in which we live that on the outlier of outcomes where the Knicks finish, around 500, below 500. Again, this is their, we've talked about it past. 21-22, they won, 4 seed, home court advantage, eventually lost to the Hawks, but everyone assumed, okay, this is the start of a thing. There's a lot of reasons that's the team's far better now, more well balanced, etc. Just the reality is there's no guarantees. East is going to be better. The rest of the NBA is going to be better. Should that things not work out as the team, the players, everyone hopes, there's going to be a call for blood. Somebody's going to have to get thrown overboard. And Leon Rose is acutely aware that if he throws Tibbs overboard, that keeps his head off the chopping block for at least a year, at least a season, at least a month, at least a week, whatever the case might be. He can go into Dolan's office and say, hey, we're really close. I'm going to get you that superstar, I promise. We just needed a new voice. Once we bring in Dan, whatever the coach is, I have ultimate faith in this coach is going to turn everything around.
Yeah.
Get the best out of Bruns, get the best out of Randall, and get everybody on the same page. Tibbs is too much of a hard, tough guy, yada yada yada. So that is the reason why I think, and Dolan's obviously more likely to agree with Rose and accept the decision that Rose has made to fire Tibbs if he doesn't owe Tibbs 3, 4, 5 years worth of contract money.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, to me, I'm a little surprised only in that this has been a front office and an ownership that loves to tout their wins, even if they're not really wins. I feel like I would see them wanting to kind of give Tibbs an extension to kind of look at them and say, hey, look, we 2 out of 3 years in the playoffs, we've been highly successful. Fans are happy. And now we've extended the coach, just like they, really championed the RJ Barrett extension last year, the way they championed the Julius Randle extension the year before that. I would argue the way they championed picking up Tibbs' fifth-year option after his first year, which is still mind-boggling to me that was done. I thought that was a horrendous move. Still think it was a horrendous move, but that's another story. Like, they love to tout their wins. And, like, for a team that hates the media, they also kind of like to manipulate the media. So I'm a little surprised I didn't extend Tibbs, especially because one of the reasons why apparently he stayed last year and survived that terrible season in 2022 was that he, quote unquote, takes the bullets in the press conferences. Like, he sits there and answers these questions because, like you mentioned, by the CBA, he has no choice. Like, they value those kind of things. So I'm a little surprised they haven't been more proactive. I mean, again, vaguely saying I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks at least looked into the topic. I mean, that's not necessarily all that enthusiastic about the Knicks saying that this is someone they want to keep in tow for a long time. Now, Ian in that mailbag also mentioned that it's important to note that Tibbs' 5-year deal that now is 5 years because of the option that was picked up coincides with both Leon Rose's contract, which is 5 years, and Worldwide West's contract, that's 5 years. So that creates also another wrinkle. So it's like, how long do Leon and West see themselves doing this? Are they going to be doing this beyond that 5 years? If they are, do they see Tibbs as being part of that equation? Do they want to get their extensions before they talk to Tibbs about an extension? Does Tibbs want them to get extended maybe before he takes an extension? Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into it. I know one thing. I think Knicks would be highly foolish to extend Tom Thibodeau before this season. Highly foolish. Because I think we saw in the playoffs this past season that Tibbs can get exposed when he's up against elite level coaching. Well, we saw 2 years ago, it didn't have to be elite level. I wouldn't call Nate McMillan an elite level coaching. He got badly outcoached by him. But when you see these matchups and the rubber really meets the road when it comes to true, decision making and true adjustments from game to game, that sometimes Tibbs is too slow to make the proper adjustments. And we saw that against Miami. We saw it 2 years ago against Atlanta. And at this point in time, the Knicks are in that we're trying to get past perennial playoff team to championship contender level. If you're trying to get that championship contender level, you have to ask yourself a serious question. Do you trust Tom Thibodeau to make the right adjustments game in and game out in the biggest, most important games in the postseason for you to get to that promised land? I don't know how that answer is yes, given what you've seen from him in those moments. If it is, God bless you, I don't see it. So he'd have to show me this year some market improvement in that regard. The Knicks may lose in the second round again. But maybe he said, okay, they fought hard. Tibbs made good adjustments. They just got beat by a better team, whether Boston was better, Milwaukee was better, Philly was better. You can maybe live with that. But we have another series where we're looking at this saying, what was with this rotation? Why is this guy playing this many minutes? Why isn't Obi playing more? Like, these questions can't be being asked again in another postseason for Tom Thibodeau if he's going to get an extension.
Yeah, and I think the value of Thibodeau is bringing a kind of a franchise kind of teetering on the, on the fringes of respectability that, kind of lost its way. Bring in a drill sergeant, get everybody on the same page, the inmates running the asylum type of thing where say, listen, we're not going to do this, we're going to focus on solely winning. We're going to work our tails off. And he's great at squeezing the last 2% out of, every player and maximizing their production on the floor night in, night out. But the downside to that is, and the downside to having the reason why there's a good cop and a bad cop, the reason why, you ideally want to balance a strict parent with a parent that's give you a little more leeway, is because there's a burnout factor. There's a time and a point in all sports where you start to tune out the coach. Unless you have amazing success. Belichick got away with it, because he kept winning. Did that have a lot to do with Tom Brady?
Yeah, because Tom Brady helped with that too.
But, Bill Parcells would win for a little while, go on to the next thing. Win for a little while here, go on to the next thing. Tibbs, the Bulls were wallowing in post-Jordan, demise. He comes in, gets them back on track, a respectable team. Yep. The Wolves hadn't won a playoff game in for however long, finally got them back to the playoffs, but then they burned everything out. And, could we be trending that way with the Knicks? My answer would be not necessarily if Tibbs is willing to adjust his approach, which means not playing these guys 39 minutes a night. The key of I think an important, point looking forward is not just in-game adjustments, but the ability to look towards, beyond the Tuesday night in January, making it the most important thing on earth. Steve Kerr and all these other guys, the top echelon coaches, we saw how kind of lax. I don't want to say Spoelstra let the team slack off during the year, but he obviously didn't make it an important. Pop, preaches against game management now, but he introduced the entire theory of it to rest Duncan and Parker and Manu and those guys. So we'll see if Tibbs. I think Tibbs needs to do a little bit more of that in order to kind of. He doesn't need. There's a chance of these guys burning out if he keeps his foot on the gas 365 days a year, every day for years and years and years.
And look, I mean, I'm not going to say they're not going to be teams with guys that are disgruntled, but I mean, you already Ian said it on the show we just did. I mean, that Obi Toppin frustration was not cosmetic. It was real. We know what Fournier's dealing with right now, even though I would argue it's really his own damn fault that he's that frustrated, but whatever. Cam Reddish, Kemba Walker. I mean, these are guys like you mentioned in one of the episodes we just did, where it's like, maybe you having one guy each year is fine. You don't want to have multiple guys, but at a certain point, like you do get nervous about, is he riding these guys enough, and is he being, Tibbs a certain kind of way, and does that wear on guys, especially if they're not getting the kind of playing time, they're not getting what they want. That that's what scares me, because I think the Knicks are in this weird position where we don't want to have like a year. I don't know if we'll ever have a year like 2022, given barring injuries can of course change anything. Do I see the Knicks not even being close to making the playoffs one of these years? I don't see that, because I see them falling to playing. That could happen. Yep. But like we don't want to see that downside. We don't want to see them take a step back because they've kind of decided, no, we're turning off this coach, because you don't have time. Jalen Brunson, he's on the best deal in the NBA right now. If you don't maximize these years, whether it's competing for a championship or at the very least building yourself towards getting to that next step, competing for a championship, then you're wasting time, because he's going to get a max contract, a super big deal once this is done. So they have to maximize the time as much as they can. They cannot waste time. They cannot waste years. And what we've seen from Tom Thibodeau teams is they start off really well in his 10 years, and then the team just forgets about it. They just decide they're not going to play hard anymore. And we can't have that this year. We can't have that next year. So that would be the concern I have. If you extend Tibbs, that guys start rolling their eyes, say, oh God, here we go. We got 4 more years of, him doing 2-hour practices after tough games. They might not want to deal with that stuff anymore. So that would be my concern. And
the value with Tibbs, real quick, is again, getting the franchise back on the the straight and narrow, and the clown show and the circus that the Knicks have become. Now you have Tibbs, but now with Brunson and Hart and DiVincenzo, you have that kind of core, that leadership on the field. It may lend itself more to having a Joe Torre type as opposed to a disciplinarian. So we'll see how it plays itself out. But yeah, I would be. If we're talking about training for superstars too, how would Luka Doncic mesh with how would Embiid mesh with
We did the poll from the Athletic during the playoffs. Tibbs is the least most desirable coach to play for in the NBA. I mean, I'm not saying these guys won't come here because he's the coach, but how long does he last when those guys get here? Like, does this become like Kenny Atkinson was a coach people love to play for, and stars came here and said, get this guy out of here? You think Kevin Durant or type was going to want to listen to Tom Thibodeau?
If Luka comes here, then it's Luka's team and his franchise. He decides. If Giannis comes here, Giannis comes and he gets to pick the coach, and the same way that all these other that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah. So the Tibbs contract situation continues to be something to look at. I think is one of the more underrated storylines heading into the season. But lastly, as we get out of here real quick, there's a big shift in the Atlantic division. Maybe not shift, but a big development. So you got Jaylen Brown officially signing his $303 million contract. He is now the highest paid player in NBA history. So Brown had one of his best years, maybe the best year of his career. Averaged 26 points a game, 49% shooting. Those are both career highs. The move, again, solidifies the Celtics moving forward with the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown tandem for the foreseeable future. Tatum, by the way, he's due for an extension next year. That could be worth $338 million. So hello, second apron, Boston Celtics. It seems like that's where you're going to be headed very soon. So quickly, do you think the Celtics will regret this Brown contract?
Yeah, so a couple things real quick. It's important to note that when we talk about contracts, the number's insane, $300 million. Yes. And it's, you'll see tweets. It's more than Larry Bird and Michael Jordan made in their careers combined and all those other things. It's important to note inflation, all this other stuff. But more importantly, you got to concern yourself with the percentage of the cap. Jaylen Brown's the highest paid player in the NBA history today, just like Mike Conley was how many ever years ago.
Just like Justin Herbert is like, what is he? One of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL today.
Exactly. Mahomes is, I think, is 4th or 5th on the list.
Right.
Now, and then when Joe Burrow was waiting to see what Herbert got, and now Burrow will come in on top of that.
Right.
The same way, the NBA is a little different because it's kind of structured supermax style. Percentages of cap, again, 35%. All that being said, I understand where the Celtics are coming from. I just don't know if, even considering that it's the cap is going to rise, they have the influx of TV money, etc. I just don't know. Again, Jaylen Brown's not going to be the highest paid player a year from now, but he's still going to be top 10-ish, top 8, top 12, a few years. I don't think he's that caliber of player. So I was a little bit surprised, I'll admit, that the Celtics didn't push back a little bit and said, we'll give you, 31% of the cap, 29% of the cap. Start at 29, raise to 33. So it comes in at like 285 or, 274 or something along those lines. But it's pretty clear. Brown was, max me or trade me. And so from that scenario, I think there's a reasonable argument to be made that the Celtics did the right thing just for this sole reason. It's better to have a player and be able to trade him than to lose him, via free agency for nothing when he could have become an unrestricted free agent. Again, we all knew the Bradley Beal contract was I want to say awful, but was a overpay when the Wizards.
It's bad for the Wizards, right?
It was bad for the Wizards this time last year.
Yeah.
But what worked out better? They ended up getting that trade looks a little better now. They have a ton of second rounders that they can combine into first and pick swaps. Whereas if they would have just let him walk and not signed that bad contract, they would have got nothing for it. So I think that's what happens with Jaylen Brown, is he gets traded within a few years. I don't think those two guys' complementary skill sets are going to, mesh and win a championship long term. They were just 2 wins away from a title. And Brown played great in the finals against Golden State. But whether it's a trade for a point guard, as Dame Lillard, a younger version of Dame Lillard for Brown, I thought it made a lot of sense. Something along those lines. And I think that's kind of the way it shapes out. But they keep him in-house now and then kind of worry about the rest later.
John Wall, Russell Westbrook, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, those guys on the same team. To me, those guys have 4 things in common. Those are guys. Westbrook was a superstar, but then quickly declined. They became non-superstars on supermax deals.
Yep.
And what we've seen is that those guys, and Bradley Beal, that was the other guy, those guys are extremely hard to trade, extremely hard to move, and get considerable value for them. I am of the belief that I don't think I'd ever give out a supermax deal for a guy that's a non-superstar. I just think that we've seen that it's too hard to get off those contracts and get comparable value. I think if I was a worse team, I may be more inclined to do it. If I was a good team, that would concern me, because if I'm a team that's actually trying to win a championship and I decide I do need to move off of Jaylen Brown, I need to have equal value. I don't want to trade for less for a team that's trying to win next year. So all that being said, I think they will regret this. I think that Jaylen Brown is a really good player. He's a two-way player. I don't think that he complements that greatly with Jason Tatum when they don't have a point guard still. I think they keep doing all these other moves, re-signing Jaylen Brown, signing Kristaps Porzingis. Who is the floor general? I'm still asking that question in Boston. And don't give me Derek White. Derek White's a good scoring point guard. He's a good lead guard, but he's not a floor general. I think Brogdon could do that role if he's healthy. The guy's never healthy, so don't give me him either. That has been the thing that's been missing in Boston since Rajon Rondo left, quite frankly. And all these other moves that we're seeing, I'm like, that team continues to struggle with closing games and figuring out how to get late offense that doesn't involve this one of those two guys just trying to dribble against 5 guys. Brown having a little bit of trouble with that because he doesn't have the greatest handle, and the team falling apart in those moments. So to me, without that subsequent move that I think elevates the ceiling for a Tatum Brown tandem working, I don't love this because I don't know what you could get for Jaylen Brown on the trade market with him due to make $60 million next year. I think this year, I think you could have traded for him and got maybe more. Now, I don't know what the offers were, so maybe I'm just dead wrong on that. But I was clamoring for a Brown for Trae Young swap. I thought it would worked well for both teams. Don't know if either team would have been interested. But the fact that didn't happen, now here we are. So I think we'll see what happens. You know that second apron, you have a very, very stringent, tight kind of restrictions that you kind of have to work through. So if they sign Tatum to another big deal, considering the other guys got in their team, it will be interesting to see how they fill out their roster.
Yeah, I mean, the second apron thing is fascinating. And just the last thing I'd say is that with Brown, if you're going to trade him, you got to understand that the team trading for him is going to understand his agent's going to tell whoever he's signing a max deal. So don't trade for him unless you want to give him max deal. So now you got to find a team to pay him that max money and then give up assets.
But then if he's not, when you trade him though, he can't get this. He can't get this 303, because it's got to be on the team that you were on. So there's that at least. Now you still got to give him 250. You still give him a lot, but it's not 300. And that's why I think Jaylen Brown, really wanted to sign, because I think he knew this is why the league put this in here. They didn't like these guys leaving. They wanted an incentive for these guys to stay, and they thought this would work. Now, what we've seen is guys sign this and say, all right, trade me next year. So I don't know if that's going to happen in this situation, but that is why this is here. So shout out to Jaylen Brown. I thought that his comments about wanting to build a black Wall Street in Boston was awesome. I've criticized Jaylen Brown for some of the other non-basketball stuff he said, but I think a lot of stuff he said yesterday was awesome. So I want to make sure I give him his flowers to that. Of course, it's a Knicks podcast, so I'm not rooting for them to do well, but I'm rooting for them to do well when it comes to helping bridge the wage inequity in Boston, of course, in the country as a whole. So shout out to Jaylen Brown. Congrats on the new contract. That'll do it for this edition of Orange and Blue Bloods. Again, this is a New York Knicks podcast, an Audacy WFAN original. It's a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service to get these episodes every time we drop. Also, check us out on YouTube. This will be up there as well. You find us on the WFAN channel there. Tommy, let people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. Again, thank you guys again so much for checking us out. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.